businessman discovers his partner brother's betrayal, but his revenge is unbelievable. Michael Peterson never imagined that the most important day for the company he built with his brother would become the worst of his life. The meeting to secure the biggest contract in Peterson Metalworks history was happening in the conference room, but something about Stephen's behavior made him uneasy. That's when his brother's phone, left on the table, lit up with a message that changed everything. "Confirmed for tomorrow. The documents are ready for the full transfer," read the notification from an unknown number. Confused, Michael picked up the phone and saw other messages that shattered his world. "Stephen, you forgot your phone here," Michael called, trying to keep his voice steady. His brother turned quickly, and Michael saw panic in his eyes. "Oh, thanks." Stephen reached out, but Michael held onto the phone. "Who's this number texting about document transfers?" The silence that followed was deafening. The clients in the meeting room kept talking, unaware of the drama unfolding. "Michael, it's nothing serious. Just some paperwork for—" "Stephen, I saw the messages," Michael interrupted, lowering his voice. "Full transfer. What does that mean?" Stephen glanced around, noticing they were drawing attention. "Let's talk later. Right now we need to focus on the meeting." But Michael couldn't concentrate. Throughout the presentation, the words echoed in his mind. When the clients finally left, satisfied with the proposal, Michael turned to his brother. "Now you're going to explain what's happening. Michael, you're overreacting. It's just some side investments I've been making." "Side investments with our company?" Stephen sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "Look, we got a really good buyout offer. I thought we should consider it." "A buyout offer? And you didn't think to tell me?" "I was going to, but I wanted to make sure it was serious first." Michael felt the ground vanish beneath him. That company was everything to him. Ever since their father passed away 5 years earlier, they'd worked together to keep it growing. "Who's the offer from?" "Blackwell Industries." Michael froze. Blackwell Industries was their biggest competitor, and its owner, Richard Blackwell, had always tried to buy smaller companies to create a monopoly in the region. "Are you serious? Our biggest rival?" "Michael, the offer is huge. We could retire with that money." "Retire? Stephen, I'm 38. This company is my life." "And mine too, but nothing." Michael slammed his fist on the table. "You can't make a decision like this alone." Stephen stood up, visibly angry. "And why not? I'm an owner too." "Because we're partners. Because we built this together." "Together?" Stephen laughed bitterly. "Michael, you were always Dad's favorite. You always made the big decisions." "That's not true, isn't it? Then why do you sign all the major contracts? Why do you talk to the main suppliers?" Michael fell silent, hearing the resentment in his brother's voice for the first time. "Stephen, I didn't know you felt this way." "Of course you didn't. You never asked." The conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Barbara, the secretary who'd worked with them for 15 years, entered with a worried expression. "Sorry to interrupt, but I need to talk to you." "Now's not a good time, Barbara," Michael said. "It's about the messages on Stephen's phone," she whispered. "I overheard the conversation." Stephen paled. "Barbara, this isn't your business. When it involves the company I've worked at for 15 years, it is my business," she replied firmly. "Michael, there are things you need to know." Barbara opened a folder she was holding in her hands. "For the past few months, I've noticed irregularities in the financial reports. Withdrawals that don't match the reported expenses." "What are you implying?" Stephen stood up abruptly. "I'm not implying anything. I'm showing you." Barbara placed the papers on the table. "These are transfer receipts you authorized, Stephen. Money that left the company account and went into your personal one." Michael picked up the papers with trembling hands. The numbers were clear. Over the last 2 years, significant amounts had been diverted. "Stephen, what is this?" They're advances I took. I'll pay everything back." "Advances?" Michael examined the amounts. "This is over $200,000. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now back to the story. "Where did this money go?" Michael asked, trying to stay calm. Stephen stayed silent, staring at the floor. "Barbara, could you give us a moment?" Michael requested. After the secretary left, Michael approached his brother. "Stephen, we've always been honest with each other. What's going on?" I have some debts," Stephen murmured. "What kind of debts?" "Gambling," the word came out as a whisper. Michael felt like he'd been punched in the gut. "Gambling? You've been betting?" "It started small just to relax, but then you lost control," Michael finished, sinking into his chair. "I thought I could win it back. That's why I agreed to talk to Blackwell Industries. With the sale, I could pay everything off and still have plenty left for both of us." "You don't understand, Stephen. This place isn't just a business to me. It's our father's legacy." "Our father's legacy?" Stephen laughed bitterly. "Dad never gave me the same attention he gave you." "That's not true." "It is. Since we were kids, you were the responsible one, the one who'd inherit everything. I was always just the younger brother there to help." Michael looked at Stephen with tear-filled eyes. "I never wanted you to feel that way." "But I did. And when Dad got sick, he only talked to you about the company. With me, he talked about other things, like I wasn't capable of understanding the business." "Stephen, you've always been smart. Dad knew that." "Then why did he leave you as the only one in charge of strategic decisions?" Michael fell silent. He remembered his last conversations with his father in the hospital. It was true, his father had focused on passing all the company details to Michael. "Maybe he believed you had other talents." "Other talents," Stephen repeated sarcastically. "Like losing money gambling?" "When did this start?" "Right after Dad passed. I felt useless. You naturally took the lead, and I started looking for something to make me feel good about myself." "And gambling made you feel good?" "When I won, yes, I felt clever, capable. But when I lost, you took money from the company." Stephen nodded, ashamed. "I always meant to pay it back. I always thought the next time I'd win it all back." Michael rubbed his face, trying to process everything. "And the offer from Blackwell Industries?" "They found out about my debts. Richard Blackwell approached me and said he'd help me pay everything off, but in exchange, I'd have to convince you to sell the company." "They blackmailed you?" "Not exactly. It was more like an offer. They knew I was desperate." Michael stood and walked to the window, looking out at the factory yard where dozens of employees were working. "Stephen, do you have any idea what this means? If Blackwell Industries buys our company, they'll lay off most of the employees. These people have worked here for years." "I know, but you chose to save your own skin." The words came out harsher than Michael intended. "Michael, I was desperate. You don't understand the pressure I was under. You should have talked to me." "And said what? That I'm a failure, that I couldn't even keep my personal life in order?" Michael turned to look at his brother. "That you needed help. We're family, Stephen." "Family," Stephen sighed. "Sometimes I don't feel like part of this family." "Why not?" "Because you've always been perfect. The exemplary son, the devoted husband, the present father, and me. I'm just the younger brother living in your shadow." Michael was shocked by the painful honesty in Stephen's words. "I never knew you felt that way, because you never asked, and I never had the courage to say it." At that moment, Barbara knocked on the door again. "Michael, your mother is here. She wants to talk to both of you." Mrs. Margaret Peterson, at 70, still carried the elegant posture that always defined her. She entered the room with her usual purse and the serious expression her sons knew well. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Michael asked. "Barbara called me, said you two were having a serious argument." Michael looked at the secretary, who lowered her eyes. "Barbara, you shouldn't have—" "She absolutely should," Mrs. Peterson interrupted. "When it comes to my late husband's company and my sons, I have every right to know what's happening." Mrs. Peterson sat in the head chair at the meeting table. "Now tell me everything." Michael and Stephen exchanged glances. Then Michael began recounting everything he'd discovered. As he spoke, he watched his mother's face grow paler. "Stephen, is this true?" she asked when Michael finished. Stephen nodded, unable to meet her eyes. "How much do you owe?" $400,000, Stephen murmured. Mrs. Peterson clutched her chest, breathing heavily. "Mum, are you okay?" Michael stood, alarmed. I just need a moment. Barbara quickly brought a glass of water. Mrs. Peterson, should I call a doctor? No need. It's just my blood pressure. She took a sip. $400,000, Stephen? How did you let it get this bad? Mom, You what? Thought you could gamble away a lifetime's work? Mrs. Peterson's voice trembled with emotion. This company was your father's dream. He worked 40 years to build it. I know, Mom. You know. If you knew, you wouldn't have done what you did. Michael had never seen his mother so angry with one of her children. And you, Michael, she turned to her eldest. How did you miss this? Mom, You've both disappointed me. One for doing it, the other for not seeing it. The silence that followed was heavy. Mrs. Peterson took a deep breath, steadying herself. Now tell me, what's the plan to fix this mess? Blackwell Industries offered to buy the company for enough to cover all the debts, Stephen said. And you think I'll let you sell a lifetime's work? Mrs. Peterson stood. Never. But Mom, how will we pay the debts? You'll work to pay them off like honest people do. Michael admired his mother's resolve, but knew the situation was more complicated. Mom, it's not just Stephen's debt. Barbara found other problems. What other problems? Barbara stepped forward with more documents. Mrs. Peterson, there are contracts signed without Michael's knowledge, commitments to suppliers that might be hiding more debts. Stephen, what else haven't you told us? Michael asked. I had to take out some loans using the company as collateral. The revelation landed like a bomb. You mortgaged our company. Michael exploded. They were just a few small loans. Small? How much? Around $100,000. Around? Mrs. Margaret was visibly shaken. You don't even know how much you owe. Michael paced back and forth, trying to process the magnitude of the problem. Barbara, do you have all the documents? I have some, but I need time to investigate everything properly. How much time? About 2 days. Mrs. Margaret stood up with difficulty. All right, here's what we'll do. Barbara will investigate everything. Stephen will accompany me home, and we'll have a very serious talk. And you, Michael, will think about how to fix this without selling the company. Mum, maybe selling is the only option, said Michael. It's not. She slammed her fist on the table with surprising force. Your father faced the crisis of the 90s. He faced Chinese competition, he faced 1,000 hardships, and never thought of giving up. You won't be the first Peterson to quit. With that, Mrs. Margaret left the room, followed by a downcast Stephen. Michael was left alone with Barbara. Barbara, be honest with me. What's your real assessment of the situation? It's bad, Michael. Really bad. But not impossible. What do you suggest? First, we need to know exactly how deep the hole is. Then we'll see what assets we can use to cover the debts without selling the whole company. And if we can't, then we'll have to consider other options. Michael looked out the window again. Down below, old Bob, the company's longest-serving employee, was guiding a young apprentice. That scene represented everything the company stood for: tradition, opportunity, family. Barbara, do you think Stephen might be hiding something else? Honestly, I think so. People with gambling problems rarely tell everything at once. How do you know that? My ex-husband had the same problem. Michael looked at Barbara in surprise. She had never mentioned details of her personal life before. I'm sorry, I didn't know. It's fine, it was a long time ago, but I recognize the signs. What signs? The way he avoids eye contact when talking about money, the overly ready excuses, the tendency to downplay the amounts. Michael nodded, realizing he'd noticed those exact behaviors in Stephen. Barbara, can you stay late tonight? I want to start the investigation as soon as possible. Of course, I'll call home and let them know I'll be late. While Barbara made her calls, Michael tried calling Emily, his 16-year-old daughter, to say he'd be home late. Hi, Dad. Hi, sweetie, I'll be late tonight. There are some problems at the company I need to sort out. Serious problems? Michael hesitated. Emily had always been sharp and perceptive. Nothing we can't handle. Dad, are you okay? Your voice sounds off. I'm fine, honey, just a little tired. Want me to save dinner for you? Sure. Dad? Yeah? If you need help with anything, you can count on me, okay? Michael smiled despite all the tension. Thanks, love. I love you. Love you too. When he hung up, Michael wondered how he'd explain it to his daughter if they lost the company. Emily had always been proud to say her father was a businessman, that he owned a company that provided jobs for so many people. Barbara returned with a stack of folders. Let's start with the most recent contracts. They worked late into the night, uncovering a situation even worse than they'd imagined. Stephen had gotten involved with loan sharks, used the company as collateral in multiple deals, and there were suppliers who hadn't been paid in months. Barbara, this is a disaster, Michael said when they finished analyzing everything. What's the total debt? Over $700,000. Michael felt the world spin around him. How did he hide all this? He was clever, used different accounts, different company names. And how you trusted him? I never questioned his decisions, Michael added. Michael, you can't blame yourself. You trusted your brother. Maybe I should have paid more attention. What matters now is finding a solution. Michael glanced at the clock. Almost midnight. Barbara, you should go home. We'll continue tomorrow. Are you sure? I am. Thank you for everything you did today. Michael, I've worked here for 15 years. This company matters to me too. When Barbara left, Michael was alone in the office. He looked at the photos on the wall, one of his father opening the factory, another of their first big order, and a picture of the three of them, father, Michael, and Stephen, from the last Christmas they spent together. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. Michael, it's Jessica. Jessica was Stephen's wife, 6 months pregnant. Hi, Jessica, is everything okay? Actually, no. Stephen came home acting really strange. He won't talk, won't eat. He just stays in the bedroom. What happened today? Michael hesitated. It wasn't his place to tell Jessica what he'd discovered. Jessica, you two need to talk. It's better if Stephen explains it to you. Michael, I'm 6 months pregnant. If something's wrong, I need to know. I understand, but this is really a conversation the two of you should have. All right, she sighed. But if you need anything, you can call me, okay? Thank you, Jessica. When he hung up, Michael thought about how this discovery would affect not just the company, but the whole family. Jessica was expecting their first child. Mrs. Margaret, at 70, didn't deserve this stress. And Emily. The phone rang again. It was Emily. Dad, are you still at the company? I am, sweetheart. Dad, did something bad happen? Why do you ask? Because Grandma called the house crying. She said there was a serious problem at the company. Michael sighed. Mrs. Margaret was clearly shaken. Emily, we'll figure it out. Dad, can I come there? Not now, honey, it's too late. Tomorrow then. Tomorrow's Saturday. I know, but I want to help. Michael smiled despite everything. You don't need to worry about this, sweetheart. Dad, I'm 16. I'm not a kid anymore. If the family business is in trouble, I want to help. Michael was silent for a moment. Emily really wasn't a child anymore. All right, you can come tomorrow. Thanks, Dad, I love you. I love you too. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Michael finally got home around 1 in the morning. The house was quiet, but he noticed the light was still on in Emily's room. He knocked softly. Come in, Dad. Emily was sitting on her bed, papers scattered around her. What are you doing up? I was researching how companies recover from crises. Michael sat on the edge of the bed. Sweetheart, you don't need to worry about this. Dad, I read about companies that went through crises and bounced back. There's always a solution. Not always, honey. Yes, there is. She grabbed some papers. Look, this company owed 3 times what it made and still recovered in 2 years. Michael looked at the printouts. How did they do it? They renegotiated all their debts, cut unnecessary costs, and focused on their most profitable clients. And it worked? It did. And check this one. They turned their creditors into minority shareholders. Michael was impressed by his daughter's dedication. Emily, this is really complicated. Dad, You always told me there's no problem without a solution, just problems we haven't solved yet. Michael smiled. She was using his own words against him. It's true, I always say that. Then let's find a solution. On Saturday morning, Michael arrived early at the company and got a surprise. Emily was already there, talking to Barbara. How did you get in? Old Jimmy the doorman recognized me, said Emily, and Barbara was already here. Emily told me about the research she did last night, said Barbara. Some of her ideas are really interesting. Like what? Renegotiating the debts in exchange for smaller equity stakes, said Emily. That way you don't lose control of the company, but the creditors become partners and have a stake in the business's success. Michael sat down, impressed by his daughter's maturity. And how does that work in practice? Instead of paying everything in cash, you offer a small share in the company, explained Barbara. For example, if you owe a supplier $100,000, you offer 5% of the company. But that means I'll slowly lose control of the company. Not necessarily, said Emily. If you give small shares to several different creditors, none of them individually will have decision-making power. Michael grew thoughtful. And do you think the creditors would accept? It depends on how you present it, said Barbara. If you show them the company has growth potential, it might be more appealing to them than just getting the money. At that moment, Stephen appeared at the door, looking worn out. Can I come in? Of course, said Michael. Stephen looked at Emily. Hi, Cuz. Hi, Uncle Stephen. Emily, could you give us a moment? Asked Michael. Actually, Dad, I'd like to stay. After all, if the company is family-owned, I'm part of it too. Michael glanced at Stephen, who nodded. Stephen, how did the talk with Mom go yesterday? Tough. Stephen sat down heavily. She cried a lot. And Jessica? I told her everything. She cried a lot too. How did she take it? At first angry, then disappointed. Now she's trying to understand how we got here. And how did we get here, Stephen? Stephen sighed deeply. Michael, I need to be completely honest. There's more you need to know. Michael's heart raced. What else? I don't just owe loan sharks and banks, I owe other people too. Who else? Colleagues from other companies, people who lent me money thinking it was for investing in our business. My God, Stephen. Michael rubbed his face. How much more? Asked Barbara. Another 200,000. 200,000? Michael exploded. Stephen, that means you owe nearly $1 million. I know it's a lot. A lot. It's impossible. How are we going to pay this? Emily stood up and placed a hand on her father's shoulder. Dad, calm down. Let's think of solutions. Emily, this isn't your responsibility, said Stephen. Yes, it is, Uncle. This company supports our family, and its future depends on me too. Michael looked at his daughter with both pride and worry. Stephen, tell me one thing. Is this everything? Nothing else hidden? That's everything? Absolutely sure. Yes, there's nothing else. Barbara was scribbling on a piece of paper. With this, the total debt comes to $900,000. And what's the company's monthly revenue? Asked Emily. About $300,000, replied Michael. And the net profit? Around $60,000 a month. Emily grabbed the calculator. That means if we used all the profit just to pay debts, it'd take 15 months to clear everything. But we can't use all the profit, Michael explained. We need to reinvest in the company, pay the employees. What if we cut unnecessary costs? Suggested Barbara. Like what? Well, you have 2 company cars, for example. And this office is very big, observed Emily. You could rent out part of it to another company. Michael Peterson began to see that there might be alternatives to selling the business. And the creditors? Do you think they'd accept installment payments? Some might agree, said Barbara, especially the suppliers who want to keep the business relationship. What about the loan sharks? Asked Michael. Stephen turned pale. They're not very flexible. What do you mean by that? They want the money in 3 months, or what? Or they'll take more drastic measures. Michael felt a chill down his spine. Stephen, how much do you owe them? $300,000. And do they know about the company? They do, that's why they agreed to lend to me. They know the business is worth more than that. Michael stood up and began pacing the room. Barbara, if we could sell some of the company's assets without selling the whole business, how much could we raise? Well, you have those old machines you don't use anymore, and there's the back warehouse which is empty. How much would that be worth? The machine's about 100,000. The warehouse, if we can lease it long-term or sell it, maybe 200,000. That would make 300,000, calculated Emily. Enough to pay off the loan sharks. But we'd still be short 600,000, Michael reminded them. For those, we can try renegotiating, suggested Barbara. Stephen, who had been silent, finally spoke up. Michael, I know I caused all this, if you want me to leave the company. And how would that help? Michael interrupted. You take my share of the business and use it to pay the debts. Stephen, your share isn't worth $900,000, but it's worth something. Michael stopped pacing and looked at his brother. Stephen, we're going to fix this together, but you'll have to work hard to earn back my trust. I'll do anything. Anything? Anything. Then you're coming with me to visit every creditor. You'll look each person we owe money to in the eye and explain in person how you plan to pay them back. Stephen swallowed hard. Okay. And you're getting help. You're going to address your gambling problem. Michael, it's non-negotiable, Stephen. If you want to stay in the company, you have to get help. Okay. Emily walked over to her uncle. Uncle Stephen, everyone makes mistakes. What matters is learning from them. Stephen looked at his niece with tears in his eyes. Thank you, Emily. Barbara clapped her hands. Well, if we're doing this, let's do it right. I need a full list of all creditors, exact amounts, and deadlines. I have everything written down at home, said Stephen. Great. Go get it now. Now? Now, Michael said firmly. We don't have time to waste. As Stephen left to get the documents, Michael, Barbara, and Emily began making a detailed plan. First, we'll list all the assets we can sell or lease, said Barbara. Second, we'll calculate exactly how much the company can pay each month without hurting operations, said Emily. And third, we'll prepare a convincing presentation for the creditors, Michael finished. When Stephen returned with the information, they spent the rest of Saturday organizing everything. By evening, they had a clear plan. On Sunday morning, Mrs. Margaret Peterson showed up at the company. What are you all doing here on a Sunday? She asked. Mom, we're working on a plan to save the company, said Michael. What kind of plan? Emily stood up. Grandma, come see. She showed her grandmother all the calculations and projections they had made. We figured out it's possible to pay off all the debts in 2 years without selling the company, Emily explained. Mrs. Peterson put on her glasses and examined the papers. And how do you plan to convince the creditors to accept this? We'll show them it's better to get the money little by little than to get nothing at all, said Michael. And if the company goes under, they'll still get nothing, added Barbara. Mrs. Margaret sat down and stayed silent for a long time. You know I still own 20% of the company, she finally said. We know, Mom. If necessary, I can use my share as additional collateral. Mom, we don't want you taking risks, said Michael. Son, I'm 70 years old. My risk is small, but the family's future is at stake. Stephen approached his mother. Mom, I'm so sorry about all this. I know, son, but sorry doesn't fix anything. Now we have to work to make it right. I'll work hard, Mom, I promise. Don't promise me, prove it. On Monday morning, Michael arrived at the company determined to start executing the plan, but early on, he received news that left him uneasy. Richard Blackwell from Blackwell Industries wanted an urgent meeting. Michael, we need to talk, said Richard, walking into the office without ceremony. Good morning, Richard. About what? About the offer I made to your brother. That offer is off the table. Michael, I know about the financial troubles you're facing. Michael tried to stay calm. Our financial troubles are none of your business. They are when they affect our shared suppliers. What do you mean by that? 3 suppliers who work with you came to me worried. They know you're behind on payments. Michael felt his stomach tighten. Richard, this is temporary. We'll settle everything. With what money? Richard sat down uninvited. Michael, be realistic. You owe nearly $1 million. There's no way to pay that with the company's current revenue. We have a plan. What plan? Michael hesitated to share details with a competitor. A restructuring plan. Michael, I admire your determination, but sometimes it's better to accept reality. The reality is this company will keep running, even if it means dragging your family down. What do you mean? Your mother is 70. Your brother has a pregnant wife. You have a teenage daughter. Is it worth risking all their futures out of pride? Michael stood up, irritated. This isn't pride, it's responsibility. Responsibility would mean accepting an offer that secures everyone's future. An offer that also cuts 50 jobs in the area. Richard sighed. Michael, business is business. I can't keep unnecessary employees. Unnecessary to you. To me, they're people with families. You can be kind, but kindness doesn't pay debts. Michael opened the office door. Richard, thanks for stopping by, but my decision is made. Michael, don't be stubborn. My offer won't last forever. Then take it back right now. Richard stood up, visibly annoyed. You'll regret this decision. Maybe, but at least I'll sleep with a clear conscience. After Richard left, Michael noticed his hands were shaking. The pressure was greater than he'd imagined. Barbara walked into the office. I heard the conversation. You did the right thing. You think so? Sometimes I wonder if I'm being selfish. Michael, you're fighting for the employees, for the community, for your family's legacy. How is that selfish? Because maybe I'm putting my family at financial risk. Or maybe you're showing your daughter that some principles are worth fighting for. Michael smiled for the first time in days. Barbara, thank you for standing by us. This company is my life too, Michael. I won't give up. Just then, Stephen arrived with a folder of documents. Michael, I organized all the creditors' information. We can start the visits today. Good, who are we seeing first? I thought we'd start with Mr. Walter Johnson from Chicago Metalworks. He's been our supplier the longest and has always been understanding. Good idea, dear listener. If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now, continuing, Mr. Walter Johnson was 65 and had been supplying raw materials to Peterson Metalworks for 15 years. When Michael and Stephen arrived at his small business, he greeted them with a warm smile. Boys, what a surprise. Sit down, sit down. Michael and Stephen took seats in the simple chairs of his modest office. Mr. Walter, we came here for an important conversation, Michael began. I imagine it's about the overdue payments, Mr. Walter said, keeping his tone friendly. Michael glanced at Stephen, who took a deep breath. Mr. Walter, I made serious mistakes that hurt our company, and that led to delays in paying our suppliers, as Stephen admitted. What kind of mistakes, son? Stephen briefly explained his gambling issues and the debts he'd accumulated. I see, Mr. Walter said thoughtfully. And what's the situation now? Michael showed the papers they'd prepared. We owe you $40,000, but we have a plan to pay it all back in 20 months with fair interest. Mr. Walter put on his glasses and examined the documents. 20 months is a long time, boys. Michael's chest tightened. I know, but, Mr. Walter continued, it's better than getting nothing, and you've always been honest with me. So you accept? I do, but on one condition. What is it? I want you to send me a monthly report on the company's finances. I want to track whether you're keeping your word. Of course, Michael said, relieved. And Stephen, Mr. Walter turned to the younger brother. Are you getting help for that gambling problem? I've already booked an appointment with a specialist, Stephen replied. Good, because addiction is an illness, son, and illness needs treatment. When they left Mr. Walter's business, Michael felt more hopeful. One down, he told Stephen. But 15 to go, Stephen reminded him. The second creditor wasn't as welcoming. It was an equipment company that supplied spare parts. You think I'm a bank? The manager snapped. I have my own bills to pay. We understand, Michael said, but we're offering fair interest. Fair interest? You've owed me for 3 months. Where was the fair interest until now? Stephen tried to explain, Sir, I take full responsibility for the delays. It was my fault. I don't care whose fault it was. I want my money. And you'll get it, Michael said. We're just asking for reasonable time. Reasonable time is now. You have 15 days to pay the $22,000 you owe, or I'll take legal action. Michael struggled to stay calm. Sir, a lawsuit won't get you paid faster. Quite the opposite. At least it'll set an example for other deadbeats. The meeting ended without an agreement. 1 yes, 1 no, Stephen summarized as they left. Let's keep going. 14 more to go. The third creditor was a pleasant surprise. It was a transport company they occasionally hired. Look, I've known you for years, the owner, Mr. Howard, said. I know you're good people. If you're struggling, there must be a reason. Stephen explained the situation again. And you think you can stick to this schedule? Mr. Howard asked. We can't, Michael said firmly. Then it's settled. But I want to be your preferred supplier once things stabilize. Absolutely. By the end of the first day of visits, the results were 5 creditors approached, 3 accepted the proposal, 2 refused. Says 60% approval rate, calculated Michael. If we maintain this average, we'll be able to renegotiate most of the debts, Stephen finished. But the second day brought worse results. Of the 5 creditors visited, only 1 accepted the proposal. What's going on? Asked Michael, discouraged. I think some of them have already talked among themselves, said Stephen. And maybe someone's influencing them against us. Someone like who? Like Richard Blackwell. Michael realized Stephen might be right. Richard had mentioned that shared suppliers had reached out to him. If that's the case, we need to act fast. On the third day, Michael decided to try a different strategy. Instead of just presenting numbers, he brought some long-time employees of the company to testify about Peterson Metalworks' integrity and importance. The strategy worked. Of the 4 creditors visited, 3 accepted the proposal. Personal testimony makes a difference, observed Barbara when Michael shared the results. That's true. People trust more when they see others trust us. By the end of the first week, they had managed to renegotiate 70% of the debts. But the toughest creditors remained, the loan sharks. Michael, I think it's better if I go alone to talk to them, Stephen suggested. No way. We'll go together. They might not like seeing outsiders. I'm not an outsider. I'm a partner in the company they're using as collateral. The meeting was set in a downtown bar. Michael had never felt so nervous. You the Peterson brothers? Asked a middle-aged man wearing expensive but tacky clothes. We are, Stephen replied. I'm Anthony Sullivan. Stephen here owes me a good chunk of money. $300,000, said Michael. That's right, and I want it paid. We have a proposal, Michael began. I don't take proposals, I take cash. Mr. Sullivan, let's be realistic, Michael said. If you force our company into bankruptcy, you'll get nothing. Who said we'd force bankruptcy? We could just take over the company. Michael felt a chill down his spine. What do you mean? Your brother signed some papers. If you don't pay on time, the company comes under our control. Michael looked at Stephen, who had turned pale. Stephen, what papers are these? I signed a collateral agreement. What kind of collateral? Anthony laughed. The kind that allows a transfer of control in case of default. Michael realized the situation was even worse than he'd thought. Is this contract legal? Completely legal, said Anthony. Notarized and everything. Michael tried to stay calm. What's the payment deadline? 2 months from today. What if we pay part now and the rest in installments? No installments, all or nothing. Michael and Stephen left the meeting in silence. Stephen, how could you sign something like that? I was desperate, Michael. They said it was just a formality. A formality? You practically handed our company over to them. I know I messed up. Michael stopped on the sidewalk. Stephen, we'll have to sell some of the equipment after all. We have no choice. But that'll affect production. It's better to produce less than nothing at all. When they returned to the company, they were surprised by what they saw. Emily was talking with some of the long-time employees. What's going on here? Michael asked. Dad, I was talking to everyone about the company's situation, said Emily. Honey, you shouldn't involve the employees in this. Why not? They're affected too. Old Bob, the longest-serving employee, stepped forward. Mr. Peterson, we already knew there were problems, and we want to help. How can you help? Well, we talked and decided to give up this year's Christmas bonus. Michael Peterson was moved. Old Bob, you don't have to do this. Doctor, this company is our second home. If it goes under, we all lose our jobs. But the Christmas bonus is your right. And exercising that right is our choice, said Mrs. Doris from accounting. We choose to help. Michael looked at the determined faces of his employees. How much would that amount to? Barbara quickly did the math. About $80,000. Still not enough for the loan sharks, Stephen muttered. But it's a start, Emily said. Old Bob stepped closer. Dr. Michael, there's one more thing. What? We know someone interested in buying those old machines in the warehouse. Who? My brother-in-law runs a smaller business and has always wanted used equipment. He can pay $100,000 up front. Michael hugged old Bob. With the Christmas bonus and the sale of the machines, we'll have $180,000, Barbara calculated. We're still short $120,000, Michael said. What about the back warehouse? Emily suggested. If we can sell or lease it long-term, we might get the rest. Mrs. Margaret Peterson, who had arrived during the conversation, stepped forward. What if we use my share of the company as extra collateral? Mom, we've already talked about this. Michael, this company is your father's legacy. Any risk is worth it. Michael looked around. His determined mother, his brave daughter, his loyal employees, his remorseful brother. All right, we'll do whatever it takes. Barbara clapped her hands. Then let's get to work. We have a lot to do in little time. The next few days were intense. Emily took charge of finding buyers for the warehouse. Barbara organized all the necessary paperwork. Stephen visited the remaining creditors. Michael handled the legal aspects. Within a week, they sold the old machines for $100,000, just as old Bob had predicted. The warehouse was leased for 5 years to a logistics company, bringing in $200,000 up front. $300,000, Emily cheered. Exactly what we needed for the loan sharks. But when they went to pay, they received devastating news. The amount has gone up, Anthony Sullivan said coldly. What do you mean, gone up? Michael asked. Late interest, you took too long to get the money. But we're still within the deadline. The original deadline. But since you delayed finding a solution, the interest kept adding up. What's the total now? $400,000. Michael felt the world crumble. We only have $300,000. Then you've only paid part of the debt. And the other $100,000. You have 1 more month to get it. Michael and Stephen left the meeting defeated. $100,000 in 1 month, Michael said. Where are we going to get that? I don't know, Stephen replied, dejected. When they returned to the company, they found another problem. Richard Blackwell was talking to some employees in the yard. What are you doing here? Michael asked. Talking to your employees about job opportunities. You're poaching our workers? I'm offering alternatives for when this company shuts down. Michael stepped closer to Richard. This company isn't shutting down. Michael, be realistic. You can't pay all your debts. How do you know the details of our debts? Richard smirked. In a small town, news travels fast. Michael realized Richard knew more than he should. Richard, I want you out of my company now. Of course, but when you change your mind, my offer still stands. After Richard left, Michael gathered all the employees. Everyone, I want you to know we're doing everything possible to save the company. We know, Dr. Michael, old Bob said, and we're with you. But you need to understand the situation is still tough. What else can we do to help? Asked Mrs. Doris. Michael was moved by the employees' loyalty. For now, just keep working hard and be patient with us. That evening at home, Michael talked to his wife about the situation. Jennifer, maybe I'm being too stubborn. Why do you say that? Because maybe it would be better to accept Richard Blackwell's offer and at least secure some money for the family. Jennifer sat beside her husband. Michael, do you think our marriage would be the same if you betrayed all your principles? What do you mean? You always taught me it's important to fight for what we believe in. If you give up now, you won't be the same man I married. But what if we lose everything? Then at least we lose fighting. Emily, who had been listening from the stairs, came down. Dad, can I say something? Of course, sweetheart. I'd rather have a father who fights for his employees and loses than a father who gives up and wins. Michael hugged his daughter. Thank you, love. Dad, I have an idea to get the 100,000 we still need. What idea? What if we ran a campaign in town? Explain to people that the company provides jobs for 50 families and asked for help. Michael hesitated. Honey, that would be like begging. It wouldn't be begging. It would be the community investing in itself. How so? Everyone who helps would get a certificate for a share in the company's future profits. Michael grew thoughtful. Is that even legal? I think so. It's like a fundraiser, but with a future return. Jennifer liked the idea. Emily's right. People in town know you're honest. And how much would each person contribute? It depends, said Emily. If 100 people gave $1,000 each, we'd have the money. $1,000 is a lot for most people here. Then 500 people with 200 each, and still too much. Dad, it doesn't hurt to try. The worst that can happen is people saying no. Michael decided to discuss Emily's idea with Barbara and Mrs. Margaret Peterson. It's an interesting idea, said Barbara, but we'd have to act fast. And how would we run this campaign? And asked Mrs. Margaret. Local radio, posters, talking to people directly, Emily suggested. And we'd have to be completely transparent about the situation, Barbara added. It might be risky, Michael considered. If we don't get the money, everyone will know we're bankrupt. People are already suspicious, said Mrs. Margaret. At least this way we show we're fighting. Michael made his decision. Let's try, but we only have 3 weeks. The Save Our Company campaign launched the following Monday. Emily made simple but emotional posters explaining Peterson Metalworks' importance to the town. The initial response was positive. Several people came forward to learn more. Dr. Michael, do you need help? Asked Mrs. Betty, who owned the bakery. We're going through a tough time, Mrs. Betty. If I contribute $100, will I get it back? That's the idea. When the company recovers, we'll pay a percentage of profits back to those who helped. And if the company doesn't recover, Michael was honest, then you'd lose what you invested. Mrs. Betty thought for a moment. You've always been good to this town. I'll contribute. By the end of the first week, they'd raised $40,000. We still need $60,000, said Barbara. But we're on the right track, Emily encouraged. The second week, the campaign gained even more momentum. The local radio did a story on the effort, and people from nearby towns started showing up. I worked there 10 years ago, said a former employee. I want to help. My husband always bought parts from you, said an elderly woman. We know you're honest. By the end of the second week, they had raised $70,000. Only $30,000 left, Emily cheered. But in the third week, the campaign stalled. Those who could help had already contributed. What now? Asked Michael, worried. We still have a week, Barbara reminded him. But where will the remaining $30,000 come from? The answer came from where they least expected it. On Thursday of the final week, Jessica showed up at the company. Michael, can I talk to you? Of course, Jessica. How are you? Okay, all things considered. I came here with a proposal. What kind of proposal? I have an inheritance from my grandfather, $50,000 sitting in savings. Michael was surprised. Jessica, I want to invest this money in the company. Are you sure? It's a big risk. Michael, I'm 8 months pregnant. This baby will grow up in this town. If the company goes under, the town gets poorer, and that affects my child's future. But what if it doesn't work out? If it doesn't, at least we tried. But I trust you. With Jessica's $50,000, they surpassed their goal. $120,000. Emily celebrated. We did it. On the day of the final payment to the loan sharks, Michael was accompanied by Stephen, and to his surprise by Mrs. Margaret Peterson. Mom, you don't have to come. Yes, I do. I want to see their faces when they get the money. Anthony Sullivan looked incredulous when Michael placed the money on the table. $400,000 as agreed. How did you manage this? With honest work and help from the community, Mrs. Margaret replied. And now you'll return the company's documents. Anthony Sullivan, visibly annoyed, handed over the papers. You got lucky this time. It wasn't luck, Michael said. It was determination. As they left, Mrs. Margaret was beaming. I knew you could do it. Mom, we only made it because you wouldn't let us give up, and because you worked together. Stephen, who had been quiet, finally spoke. Michael, I know I still have a lot to prove to earn back your trust. That's true, but this is the first step. Back at the company, they found an impromptu celebration. The employees had organized a party. We did it, old Bob shouted. We did it together, Michael corrected. Emily approached her father. Dad, now that we've paid the loan sharks, we still have other debts. That's true, we still have $600,000 to pay in 20 months. But now without the pressure of a short deadline. Exactly, and with a sustainable plan. Barbara came over with more news. Michael, 3 new clients called today. The town's campaign brought positive visibility to the company. Really? And there's more. The mayor wants to talk to us about a supply project for public works. Michael smiled, seeing things finally start to improve. 3 months later, Peterson Metal Works hadn't just stabilized. It was growing. The contract with the city had increased revenue by 30%. Stephen, true to his word, continued therapy and hadn't touched gambling since the day it was discovered. How's the treatment going? Michael asked. Hard but necessary. I'm learning a lot about myself. What are you learning? That I used gambling to escape feelings of inadequacy. And now? Now I'm learning other ways to handle those feelings. Michael put a hand on his brother's shoulder. I'm proud of you. I still have a lot to prove. But you're on the right path. 6 months after the crisis, the company threw a party to thank everyone who had helped during the tough times. This party is for you, Michael said, addressing the community. You saved our company and preserved 50 jobs in our town. Mrs. Betty from the bakery stood up. Dr. Michael, we're the ones who should thank you for not giving up. You could have sold to that big corporation and gotten rich, said another resident. But you chose to fight for us, added a third. Michael looked at Emily, who was smiling proudly. Truth is, the one who taught us not to give up was my daughter. Emily blushed but stood up. I just did what you taught me, that it's worth fighting for the people we love. Mrs. Margaret, moved, stepped up to the microphone. My husband always said a family business only makes sense if it serves the community's family. Today I see he was right. Stephen also wanted to speak. I made serious mistakes that almost destroyed everything our family built, but I learned that admitting your faults is the first step to fixing them. And the second step is working every day to earn a second chance, Michael added. Barbara, who had been crucial throughout the crisis, received a special tribute. Barbara, none of this would have been possible without you. I just did my job. No, you did much more. You stayed loyal when you could have looked for another job. You went beyond your duties. You're part of this family. A year later, Peterson Metal Works hadn't just paid off all its renegotiated debts, but had also become a model of participatory management in the region. How did you recover so quickly? Asked a journalist writing a story about family businesses. With transparency, teamwork, and community support, Michael answered. And what was the biggest lesson you learned? Michael glanced at Stephen before replying. That one person's problems affect the whole family, but also that the whole family can come together to solve them. The journalist turned to Stephen. And you, how do you feel now? I feel this crisis, as painful as it was, helped me become a better person. How so? I always felt inferior to my brother. That led me to seek validation in the wrong places. Now I understand everyone has their own worth and contribution. And what's your role now? I oversee our corporate social responsibility programs. We've created support systems for employees facing personal struggles, a way to repay the second chance you got? Exactly. Emily, now a high school senior, had developed a business management project based on her family's experience. Dad, my project got selected for the state science fair. What's it about? How family businesses can overcome crises through participatory management and community support. And what did you conclude? That a company's success isn't just measured by profit, but by the positive impact it has on the community. Michael hugged his daughter. I'm so proud of you. Dad, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you regret not selling the company when Richard Blackwell made that offer? Michael thought for a moment. Never. Because selling would have made me money but cost me my soul. How so? I'd have betrayed the employees, the community, the values my father taught me. Money isn't worth that. But what if it had failed? If we'd lost everything? At least we'd have lost fighting for what's right. 2 years after the crisis, Richard Blackwell approached Michael again. Michael, I admit I was wrong about you. How so? I didn't think you'd recover. But you didn't just bounce back. You came back stronger. Thank you. Actually, I'm here with a different proposal. What kind? A partnership. My company has grown a lot, but we've lost touch with the community. You've kept in touch. And what are you proposing? That we work on some projects together. You keep your independence, but we share some big contracts. Michael was surprised. Why the change of heart? Because I've learned that bigger isn't always better. Sometimes what's rooted in the community is stronger. I'll think about your proposal. Of course, no rush. When Richard left, Stephen approached. What do you think of his offer? It could be interesting, but we'd need to be very careful and completely transparent. Do you trust him now? I don't trust him, but I trust us. 3 years after the crisis, Peterson Metalworks had become a model for family-run businesses and social responsibility. They hosted visits from students and entrepreneurs from other regions. How would you define the secret to your success? Asked a group of college students. Michael, Stephen, Mrs. Margaret, and Emily, now studying business administration, were present for the talk. There's no secret, said Michael. Just hard work, honesty, and unity. But what was your toughest moment? Asked one student. Stephen answered, when I had to look at my family and admit I'd betrayed their trust. And how did you overcome it? With a lot of talking, hard work, and patience, said Mrs. Margaret. Did you have to forgive your son? Forgiving was easy. The hard part was teaching him to forgive himself. And now, how's your relationship? The question was directed at the brothers. Michael looked at Stephen. Now it's more mature. Before I protected Stephen. Now we support each other. And you, Stephen? Now I feel like a true partner, not just the younger brother here to help. Emily also spoke up. For me, the most important lesson was that problems can bring a family together if the family is willing to face them as one. Do you have advice for other family businesses? Michael thought, before answering. Total transparency. Don't hide problems from each other. And always remember, a family business only makes sense if everyone in the family feels valued. And don't be afraid to ask for help, Stephen added. Pride nearly cost us everything. And trust your community, said Mrs. Margaret. If you're honest with people, they'll be honest with you. 5 years after the crisis, Peterson Metalworks had tripled in size. They now employed 150 people and had opened a branch in a nearby town. Dad, remember when we thought we'd lose everything? Asked Emily, now the company's special projects manager. How could I forget? The hardest months of my life. But also the most important, Michael reflected. Yes, because that's when we discovered what we're truly capable of when we stand together. And we learned our family is much bigger than we thought, Stephen added. How so? It includes the community, the employees, the suppliers, everyone who believed in us. Mrs. Margaret, now 75 but still active in the business, joined them. Do you know what I'm proudest of? What, Mum? That you turned our family's worst crisis into our greatest victory. How so, Grandma? Asked Emily. Because you could have chosen revenge. You could have kicked Stephen out, sold the company, each gone your separate ways. And why would that be revenge? Asked Stephen. Because it would have given you exactly what you deserved for your mistakes. So what was our revenge then? Michael asked, intrigued. Mrs. Margaret smiled. Your revenge was turning betrayal into transparency, distrust into unity, failure into lessons. I don't follow, Mom. Michael, the best revenge you could have had on Stephen was showing him he was worth becoming a better man. And that's what you did. Stephen was moved. Mom, I never thought about it that way. "Son, when someone hurts us, we have two choices: hurt them back or help them be better. You all chose the second option." "And it worked," said Emily. "It worked for all of us," agreed Michael. Barbara, who remained the executive secretary but was now also a minority partner in the company, stepped closer. "Michael, an interesting proposal came in." "What kind of proposal?" "A university wants to do a case study on our recovery." "What for?" "To teach other business owners about crisis management in family businesses." Michael looked at his gathered family. "What do you all think?" "I think we should accept," said Emily. "Maybe our story can help other families." "I agree," said Stephen. "If our experience can prevent others from going through what we did, then it's worth it," Mrs. Margaret Peterson finished. On the day of the university presentation, the whole family was there. "What was the moment you knew you'd overcome the crisis?" a professor asked. Michael looked at each family member. "When I realized I wasn't alone, that I had a united family and a community that believed in us." "And you, Stephen? What was your turning point?" "When my brother told me we'd solve everything together, even after finding out everything I'd done." "And you, Mrs. Margaret?" "When I saw my children working together, not blaming each other, focused on the solution." "And you, Emily?" "When I realized the company's problems were also my problems and that I could be part of the solution." "If you had to sum up the whole experience in one sentence," Michael thought for a moment, "our family's biggest crisis became our greatest opportunity for growth." "Would you do anything differently if you could go back?" Stephen answered without hesitation. "I'd talk to my family about my problems before they became a crisis." "And you, Michael?" "I'd pay more attention to the signs that my brother was struggling." "So do you blame yourselves for what happened?" Mrs. Margaret answered for them all. "It's not about blame, it's about responsibility. Each of us took responsibility and worked to fix things." "What's the main message you'd like to leave?" Emily stood up. "That family isn't just blood. It's a choice. We chose to fight for each other, and that made all the difference." "And that no problem is too big when faced with honesty and unity," added Michael. "And that the best revenge against those who hurt us is helping them become better people," Stephen finished. When the presentation ended, the family went to lunch together, as they had every Sunday for 5 years. "Dad, do you regret anything?" Emily asked. "Just one thing." "What?" "That it took me so long to realize how strong our family is." "And you, Uncle Stephen?" "I regret the mistakes I made, but I don't regret the lessons I learned." "And you, Grandma?" "I don't regret a thing, because everything we went through brought us here." "And is here a good place?" Mrs. Margaret looked around the table, her 2 sons, now true partners, her granddaughter, who had become a wise and determined young woman, Barbara, who had become part of the family. "Here is the best place in the world." The end. Now tell us what you thought of this story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share, leave us a sincere comment. Do you think Michael made the right choice by not selling the company? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to like and, most importantly, subscribe so you don't miss other heartwarming stories.